Well, add 10 minutes to the further recording. We'll have to edit that out. You can do it. Can you see if you can click on the record button and see if you can pause it? Adam, should I go ahead and introduce myself and get started?
It is 12:59 presently, so let's give it one more minute. I think we still have a few folks getting on.
Oh.
It is 1 o'clock by my watch, and so we will begin now. I would like to, my name is Adam Kantrovich. I co-chair the National Farm Income Tax Extension Committee, along with Dr. Ruby Ward out of Utah State University. I appreciate everybody that's attending today. Some of you that may have attended some of our webinars in the past may know and recognize that normally we work with USDA, and these webinars are going through farmers.gov. We had to pause that for a little bit and hope to be able to return soon. I do want to say thank you to Dr. Ruby Ward and Miss Annie White, which is also on, for helping keep JC, myself, and others straight, and being quite helpful in getting all of this coordinated and set up. I did notice Miss Janet Wright from USDA is also attending, and I'd like to say thank you to her for their support and continued support for our programming and our work in this area. Today we have Mr. J.C. Hobbs, an Associate Extension Specialist with the Department of Ag Economics at Oklahoma State University. J.C. works through one-on-one consultations as well as other programming activities in a variety of areas with farmers, ranchers, the ag and forestry communities in areas of farm financial management as well as taxes, and is in charge of the Oklahoma State University Extension Tax School programming. And so today he's going to be the main speaker for IRS Form 1099 issues, proper reporting, and correcting errors. Again, I would like to make sure that if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those questions using the Q&A and or the chat feature. We will do our best to be able to respond to those, and if not, we will attempt to get your information so that if we need to do a little bit more research, we're able to do so and be able to respond to your questions in an appropriate manner. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mr. J.C. Hobbs. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. As Adam said, what we're looking at today are Form 1099 items, and for farmers and other ranchers and others, you can either be a payee, in other words, a receiver of a 1099, or the payor, which is required to provide a 1099 to the payee. So we'll get into the presentation here. There's first thing up is a disclaimer. This material based on work from USDA. We have an agreement. There's the number. What we're working to do is educate farmers, ranchers, and others on tax implications of various rules and situations that apply Again, our services don't constitute or imply an endorsement by the USDA. We are just providing education. So none of what we've presented should be considered formal, legal, or tax advice. Again, presentation is for educational purposes. Now, some of this educational purpose, we've tried to couch it a little more so that it is useful for tax preparers. So if you're a farmer and rancher watching this thing, producer, and this might be helpful if certain situations arrive, to print out this material and take it to your tax professional. It's always important to work with a tax professional because everybody's specific situation is different. And we kind of cover generalities in this presentation as well as some of our others. So you'll want to visit with a good understand or trusted professional, and that way you could know exactly, or you can work together to figure out exactly your specific pieces of the puzzle and how to best apply the rules. Here's our website. You've got a QR code there at the left-hand side of your screen. And if you hover your phone over that, it'll take you to our website, which is the ruraltax.org website. It's hosted by Utah State University. We're part of the National Farm Income Tax Committee. That group actually works with IRS to provide information for updating the publication 225, which is the Farmer's Tax Guide, and make sure it is accurate on an annual basis. So we update that material every year to make sure what we're providing or what is being provided is accurate and up to date. Also on our website, the ruraltax.org website, there's other tax information topics available. And there's just a few of those: disaster weather losses, government program payments, farm losses, state and gift, depreciation, etc. There's a wide variety of topics and publications, webinars, etc. on that website. Feel free to start reviewing, questioning. Also, if you have questions, at the end of the workshop, we'll tell you how to email ruraltax.org and with specific questions that you might have. So that comes at the end of the webinar, and I'll provide that. So what we're going to be discussing today, and we're looking primarily at the 1099 forms, information forms, that farmers and ranchers either provide to their payees, those that they pay, or what they receive from others. So first one, we'll look at 1099 miscellaneous. And if you're renting farmland, you may be writing or paying an individual, and you'll have to provide a 1099 miscellaneous to that individual. If it's royalties, oil and gas, wind turbines, the company will provide you a 1099 miscellaneous for the royalties that you receive. Also, working easements, these are temporary easements, crop damages, crop insurance, a variety of other items will show up on a 1099 miscellaneous form. Then we also have the 1099 NEC, that's non-employee compensation. So these people are not employees of yours, but they do work for you. So it's custom hire. It may be that you hire somebody to do some dozer work, clean out a fence row. Also, it may be somebody that's going to harvest your crops, put up hay. So independent contractors also fit here. You hire somebody to build fence. All you do is hire them to put the fence in. You don't provide any tools, any discussion of how it's going to be done. You let them make all decisions. Those are independent contractors. Mechanics, etc. These are services provided to you by an individual that is not an employee of the farm. So non-employee compensation is the NEC. Also in there, sometimes we have farms that have other things that they sell, and it's direct product sales. So if you're selling seed wheat to another farmer, and if that seed wheat sells greater than $5,000, you've got to provide the 1099 as well. And so it's product sales in excess of $5,000. A couple of other forms that we see farmers receiving, the 1099-S for real estate transactions. So we sell land, buy land, those come in there. So land sales, also permanent easements. So when you have a pipeline or a wind turbine or a power transmission line coming across your farm, your land, there's usually a permanent easement. That area is for the company to have for as long as they need it to access, clean up, maintain that piece of property, that be a pipeline or the transmission line. So they have access to that in perpetuity or as long as that item is on the farm. 1099 also applies to timber sales. So if you're selling timber, it fits in there as well. Then we have the 1099-G for certain government payments. Those are federal, state, local government payments. Could be a tax refund. Government agency payments. So often we'll have FSA, USDA send out various items that require them to form or send you a Form 1099-G for a payment that you receive. Also taxable grants. So proper reporting. Like I said, so you've got two ways a farmer rancher could end up with having to deal with the reporting on the 1099s. If they're the payor, if you are a payor, in other words, you're paying somebody else. If it's a 1099 NEC, you've got to get a signed Form W-9. That's a request for taxpayer identification number and certification. IRS and others have suggested to get that completed before the work begins. Once the work begins, a lot of times you're going to have to pay them, but they may not provide you that information. So you want to get that done early, make sure it's correct, or as correct as you can. You complete that form with the amounts in the correct boxes of the correct form. So it's a 1099 NEC, not the miscellaneous. Typically, the accountant will do this for you. So you provide the information collected on the W-9. That's the employer and the person's identification numbers. That's a social security number or employer, some kind of other identification number of that individual. Their name, address, full name, address, all of that. And then you provide that to your tax preparer. And then they're going to fill out the 1099 NEC and then provide that to that individual that where you paid. It's due to the payee by January 31st of the following year. And if there's an error on that form that you've sent, and they'd let you know that there's a problem, you need to correct those errors for that recipient and reissue the form. Those are what you're supposed to do. Now, what happens if, and this happened to me, I have had this problem. I hired a group to put some fence in. They did not provide me a correct social security number or an employee identification number. Neither of them. They were inaccurate. When I turned in the tax return or mailed in my tax return, and they tried to match it to that individual's tax return, it couldn't. So I got a nice little letter from the IRS. I was the payor. I got a letter from the IRS stating that social security number did not match the name on the W-9 form. Also didn't match the name on the 1099 form that I sent. I was asked to get a correct number. I could not. The other suggestion on there, since I could not get a correct number, was to never use that individual again until I was provided a correct social security number or EIN. Consequently, I never did hire them to do any more work for me. Also, let's say the payee will not sign the W-9. So the person I hired, if he was not willing to sign it, then as the payor, I have to apply the backup withholding rules. Your accountant will understand what this means, but you're going to withhold 24% of the amount that you should owe them. So let's say you owe them $1,000. You're going to withhold 24% of that. You're only going to pay them the difference. And the IRS gets the 24%. So they get $240. The individual you paid is going to have to file a return in order to get that refund of that backup withholding. So what it's doing is it is allowing the IRS to collect the money and making sure that the payee does file the return and gets it done accurately so that we don't have a situation where they're avoiding the tax on that by not reporting that income. So it's a form that we use, and there's the rules behind it. Basically, it's making sure that both the payor and the payee have the correct information and that the IRS has remitted the funds for the taxes due. Now, the recipient requirement. So the receiver of the 1099, there are certain things that they have to do. So when I get my 1099s in typically January, I check the form for accuracy. I make sure the amount is right, all those pieces are right, and if there is an error, I inform the payor of that error and ask them to correct it. That's what the IRS instructs us to do. So if there's an error, the IRS provides rules that we have to follow. We are to instruct the recipient to contact payor, and request a corrected Form 1099. The payor's requirements are to correct and reissue that form, the corrected form, to the receiver of the payment. Does that always occur? No. Here's what a 1099 miscellaneous looks like. So what I've done here in this presentation, I've included the form so you can kind of see what they look like, so that when you see one, you kind of know what's going on. This is the 1099 miscellaneous. It's for rents, royalties, and other income. You can see there's about 8 or 9 lines there of what's going on. It's for the taxpayers' individual information, taxpayers' IDs, recipients, taxpayer information number, name, address for both the payor and the payee, and then how much those various or what the payments were. So box 1 is rents. That's cash rent, not a share rental agreement arrangement. Cash rent only. It's the working easement for a pipeline or a power line. It's the amount of the easement that they're using only while in the construction process. It's temporary. Consequently, it's treated as rent. Crop damage payments or land damage payments. If it's not a major damage issue, it's considered rent as well. Normally, it's crop damage. That can be a growing crop, an annual crop, or it could be to grass, etc., pasture. So those would go into box 1 for the most part. Box 2 is royalties. That's oil and gas royalties, wind or solar energy royalties. Those show up on box 2. Other income payments show up in box 3, crop insurance in box 9. So that's kind of what you're going to see in that miscellaneous form. Now on the NEC form, non-employee compensation, it's primarily items. Again, you're looking at the taxpayer's identification number, the recipient's tax identification number, recipient name, address, all that information. And then you show the non-employee compensation amount in box 1. If it's a direct sale, you check the box in number 2. And the box 3, you'll notice it's grayed out. It's for something in the future. But right now, those are the 2 items that would show up there on that particular form. So box 1, like I said, non-employee compensation. That's contract labor, that's machine hire, that's that custom work. Again, these are independent contractors, not employees. I can't stress that enough. If it's employee, they're under your control. You do not use the 1099 NEC. Box 2, like I said, is the direct sales where they total more than 5,000. Where that usually ends up, from the payor's point of view, it doesn't show up on Schedule F. It usually ends up on Schedule C. It's a non-farm business item. But we include it here just to make sure the IRS is aware to look in other places in the return for that information. Then there's the 1099-S. Now remember what I said that was for. That was for excuse me, real estate transactions, permanent easements, as well as timber sales. So the date of the closing is important. If it was timber sale, it's the date of the sale. If it is, that's the date when everything's done. If it's a working or permanent easement, that's the day that the permanent easement goes into place, etc. Then the gross proceeds of that. So again, you see the filer's taxpayer information number, the transfer tax ID information, So the filer's name and the person that made the transfer, all that information is included. Plus the information on the box 3 is the legal description, address of the property that's being traded or sold or purchased, etc. So that's the 1099-S. So box 2 is the gross sale proceeds, and that's sale of real estate, like I said, permanent easement, sale of timber. Then the 1099-G, these are government program payments or government payments. It could be unemployment compensation. Number for farmers, that doesn't apply. State and local income tax refunds, that could apply. Also then ag program payments or agriculture payments is box 7. Box 6 is taxable grants. Now we're going to get into a situation here in a little moment. I'm going to explain an error that has occurred and how you're going to have to fix it, because I don't know how it's ended up, but FSA has encoded some of the 1099-Gs that they're sending out for EQIP type program payments, etc., as taxable grants, and they should have been reported as ag program payments. We'll show you in a moment where the error, what happens when you put that into the return. It's going to be important that you take this information to your preparer, because I'm getting lots of questions from tax preparers all over the nation asking, I got the 1099-G, it doesn't work right, something's wrong, and what do I do? And when I say all over the nation, I received a question from a person in Hawaii, as well as some of the northern states and Oklahoma as well. So we're going to get into what to do here in just a moment. So the 1099-G form, that's unemployment compensation, state and local tax refunds, credits or offsets, income taxes being withheld, taxable grants. Put it in red here, sometimes an error. Those errors are popping up. We'll talk about how to fix them. Ag payments. If the box is checked in box 2, if box 8, if checked box 2 is trade or business income, just trying to let people know, yes, box 2, that state or local income tax refund, actually goes back to the trade or business. It is going to be treated a little differently from a tax point of view. Then box 9 is market gain with when you have sales through the Commodity Credit Corporation, or the that's no longer available. It's a market marketing something, I can't remember. It slipped my mind, but it's market gain. So why is it important to correctly report the information that we get? The recipient could have one of the following as the results occur. So the payee, the person that's paid, they receive a 1099. If it's not reported correctly to them, what can happen? Well, first off, we may not be paying self-employment tax when the recipient should have been paying self-employment tax. In other words, the payment gets put somewhere on the return versus where it should have been on the Schedule F. So what it does is it distorts things. It distorts the amount of farm income there. You could have a farm loss when really you don't. What does that imply? Well, it may impact some of our other payments that receive from FSA and others, because we don't have enough farm income to qualify for certain programs. Also, we may not qualify for some of the tax benefits afforded a true farm operation, where more than half or more than 2/3 of our income comes from the farm. Paying self-employment tax when the recipient shouldn't, or even paying tax when the recipient shouldn't. For example, you receive a 1099-S for a permanent easement. On my property, my basis in that land was $1,000 an acre. I received a temporary or permanent easement payment of $500 an acre. I didn't have to pay tax. I simply reduced the basis in my property by $500 an acre for those affected acres. Consequently, I had to pay no tax on that $500 per acre. I kicked the can down the road. If I ever sell it, then I'm going to have to pay the tax, but that could be 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now. Or I may die with it and my kids get a step up in basis when I pass, and it never gets picked up. So something to think about. You want to make sure those forms and the information is correct so that you receive the correct tax treatment and don't end up paying tax when you don't need to, or you should be paying tax to get some benefits later. Another thing that happens, you get a nice little letter from the IRS. They're seeking to determine if the payment was retorted on the return. Receive those. Where did you put that information? Well, I put it where I thought it went. So you end up writing a nice letter to the IRS, or you end up having your tax preparer write a nice letter to the IRS explaining where those dollars were reported and how they were reported and how they were taxed. Or you receive a letter from the IRS trying to figure out where it was reported when they think it should have been in one spot and it's not there. So those are some of the things that occur. You don't pay enough, you pay too much. They're trying to find it. They're trying to figure out where it went. So again, make sure you get the correct information. Now, this next portion, we're going to talk about examples. We're going to provide you some information, and I've created some examples to help you and your tax preparer correctly include payments in the tax return when they're incorrectly reported. So, as a recipient, what do? Again, this presentation is going to be available for you to download and or print. Be sure to take it to your tax preparer. Also, I put it in the note at the bottom here. If you have this situation and you've got various payments coming in, let's say you've got a contract for wind turbines or even solar panels, be sure you take that contract, the agreement, to your accountant or tax preparer so that they can do correct reporting. They can also put a copy of that in your file. So if there's an audit that ever occurs, you have the audit defense material in place so that you don't have to go back and find it. So it's very important to keep this information, print off this material. It'll help. We're trying to make this a little simpler for both you and your preparer to work through. So what happens if? So these are where we're getting into the examples. So the first situation here is a taxpayer with a temporary oil and gas easement. They should get a 1099 miscellaneous. That's our miscellaneous information. Since it's an easement, it should be reported in box 1 on the schedule or the 1099 miscellaneous. It will then typically flow to the Schedule E of the Form 1040. Your tax preparer will understand what's going on here. Taxpayer with a sale of a permanent oil and gas easement should get a Form 1099-S for that portion. Proceeds from the real estate. Those proceeds were reported in box 2 of the 1099 miscellaneous. So the temporary portion goes in box 1 on the 1099. And I apologize, I think I misspoke. The 1099-S is in box 2 of the 1099-S form. So this is 1099 miscellaneous. Again, remember what it said. Rents is the easement. This is the temporary side. And here's the 1099-S for the permanent side. There's the gross proceeds. So what happens? I did not get a correct 1099. Well, oil and gas companies sometimes issue the 1099 with correct amounts. Correct amounts will be either in the wrong box or even on the wrong Form 1099. So when this occurs, the IRS instructs the recipient, that's you as the payee, to contact the payor and request a corrected Form 1099. What typically happens is they do not respond and correct the error. I've had companies that do and responsible that will send you an updated 1099 with the corrected box checked. I've also had them just flat out ignore me. When they ignore you, what do you got to do? Because if you leave it in the wrong box or on the wrong form, it's going to get taxed incorrectly. You may pay more tax than you need to. So what happens? So the payee has to report the amount that shows up on the form on the tax return in accordance with what the IRS says it should be placed from the Form 1099. So what happens? You get a 1099 for a temporary or working easement, as well as it includes the permanent easement. It all shows up on the Schedule E. Part of it should be taxed, part of it should be deferred. If you don't fix it, you're paying more tax than you should be. So you have to make adjusting entries. So you as the payee work with your tax preparer, and you're going to adjust the entries. And I'll show you how that works in just a moment. In the tax return, you place the correct amounts on the correct forms or schedule, and that gives you the correct reporting of the amounts paid and the correct tax treatment. As a payee, you may want to include documentation. That's the easement contract, the custom work agreement, any other thing that might go in there that would show proof of how the reporting on the tax return should be. So here's an example. Jose has a pipeline easement on his land he's owned for 10 years. There's a 50-foot permanent easement, a 50-foot temporary easement. That's how wide it is. He should receive a 1099 miscellaneous for $35,000 for the temporary easement, and he should receive a 1099-S for $35,000 for the permanent easement. What he actually received? He got a 1099 miscellaneous with a full $70,000 in box 1. If he leaves it there, he's going to pay ordinary income tax on the full $70,000, and it may not be that way. Jose contacted the company. He reported the error. The company did nothing. They didn't care. Often what we find is those companies, they hire bookkeepers. They don't hire accountants. All the bookkeeper knows how to do is fill out the 1099 and put a number somewhere on that on the Form 1099 miscellaneous. They don't understand that there's two forms. The S for the permanent, 1099, the miscellaneous for the temporary. So we have the situation of, again, improper reporting. So what is the proper reporting for that payment? Well, Jose is going to do the following. He's going to show $70,000 on Schedule E, line 3. You'll notice line 3 is rents received there in that example. Then he's going to go down to line 19, which is at the bottom section of that, and he's going to put $35,000 as an expense. What does that do? That reduces the amount that's going to show up on the Schedule E that's subject to ordinary income tax to $35,000. Then we take the other $35,000 from the Schedule E as we reported on that expense side, and we're going to move it over to the Form 4797. So we're going to report $35,000 for the permanent easement. Line 2, we're going to put the basis or cost basis or adjusted basis of that property in F. So the gross sale price is in D. We're going to reduce the basis, not pay tax on that portion, only pay tax on the amount that's above the basis that we get to adjust. What happens here? We pay less tax, or possibly even no tax on this easement payment for the permanent easement. Again, it's very important because you don't want to pay any more tax than you have to. Don't leave Uncle Sam a tip. They don't know what to do with it. So now what happens, this is another situation. We have crop damage. So a drilling pad was constructed on Gunther's land. He gets $25,000 for damage to his corn crop. He gets a 1099 miscellaneous, but they put the $25,000 in box 1 of rents. It should have been other income. So what happens? If it's in rents, it's going to go on Schedule E. If it's in other income, it would go to the Schedule F. It would probably increase the amount of taxable income on the F and get it in the correct place. Again, remember what I said earlier. Sometimes we may need extra income on the F just so we can qualify for other government programs or some of the special tax law rules that IRS allows based upon our gross income from the farm. So what does he do? He contacts the company, reports the error. And again, here, nothing is corrected. Improper 1099 miscellaneous for the damage payment. He reports the 25,000 on Schedule E on line 3. He takes the 25,000 as expense on line 19, showing that it was improper reporting of crop damage. It's going to go to Schedule F. And on the Schedule F here, we put $25,000 in the sales in box 2 or line 2, which is then sales of crops, livestock, produce, anything that we raised. So that's how you correct the problem, get it moved from the E where it shouldn't be, and put it on the F where it should be. And IRS is happy because we reported it. It was reported in the place they're going to look for it. Now we've corrected it on the return, and we're happy because it reflects the proper tax reporting and treatment. What about the NEC form? So this is actually, I've seen this happen. The individual hires 2 people. Let's go to use Lisa here, hires Joe and John to pour a concrete floor in her barn. She pays each of them $1,000 for the work. But when they report the 1099 NEC, they put $2,000 on Joe's 1099, and John receives nothing. Joe reports the error to Lisa. Lisa then corrects the problem by providing both Joe and John a 1099 NEC, and with the corrected box checked on Joe's form. Since you have control of this one, not somebody else, it's very simple to fix, and it needs to be fixed by you, the payor. And here's what the 1099 NEC looks like. Remember, non-employee compensation shows up in box 1. That's the corrected box at the top. So the Joe gets a check in his showing that it was corrected. John's going to receive one with his correct amount in the boxes. Now here comes the fun part. The 1099-G. I've been receiving calls like crazy, emails like crazy. The 1099-G, and it was the USDA FSA oops. Basically, equip payments is where it's coming from. They're being reported on the 1099-G as a taxable grant. It is not. There's a nexus between that 1099-G, the equip, and the farm. So it should have been reported on box 7s. When I say nexus, that means it is applicable to the farm. It is related to the farm business. So it should be reported in box 7, ag payments. Here's what happens though. Most of our tax preparers use software. And that software, the tax software they use, takes that amount that shows up in box 6 as a taxable grant, and it puts it on Schedule 1 of the 1040. And I'll show you what the Schedule 1 looks like here in a moment. So it puts it on the Schedule 1 of the 1040, which is incorrect. This is an ag payment. Again, it needs to go to the Schedule F, reported in 4A and 4B. If it's not, what happens is we have expenses with this equip program that we're having to put out money to apply the pieces of the equip grant or equip monies as an expense. But we have nothing to offset that on the top of the Schedule F. So we don't have enough income showing where what we would paid out was offset. So it ends up really distorting our tax return. The equip payment, by being reported on in taxable grants, shows up and it doesn't get offset by the expenses. It messes up our self-employment tax to a great degree, also messes up our total taxable income. For the most part, it's kind of a wash, but it's not a desirable wash. In other words, you should be paying tax on it for self-employment purposes. It should increase your ag or your farm income. So it needs to be fixed. So that equip payment shows up, taxable grants, needs to be on 4A and 4AB of the F. Again, IRS don't know what's going to happen because we haven't processed these returns yet. My anticipation is we're going to look at some letters from the IRS, wondering where those things ended up if we don't fix it correctly. Don't know. Time will tell. So what we end up doing is basically we back out the entry on the Schedule 1, and it ends up, those two numbers and that amount ends up on 4A and 4B of the Schedule F. Now, let me explain how that works. So here's the 1099-G. You'll notice that box 6 is taxable grants. That's where they're going to find it. It should be in box 7. Not sure if SSA is going to fix it. We're down now to where we just got 15 more days in the tax year. Unless you file for an extension, more than likely you're going to have to fix it on that tax return. So equip payments reported in box 6, taxable grants, tax software puts them on Schedule 1. And it should be an additional income. And I put on there that information. It is Part 1, line 8, zebra, other income. That's where it goes on Schedule 1. And it's going to put it there. Then you're going to remove the entry. You enter the same amount on Schedule 1, Part 2, line 24Z as other adjustments. This is treated as an expense. So it zeroes out that amount because Part 1 shows the amount paid or received. Part 2 shows the expense or the amount that's deducted that will get moved to Schedule F. So the following piece, they're going to end up on Schedule F, box or line 4A and 4B for that grant that gets it treated as an ag program payment. That's what you want to do, because the bottom half of the Schedule F shows the expenses that were paid in order to put the EQIP program in place on your farm to meet the contract requirements. Oh, conclusion here. Hopefully, this kind of clarifies the proper reporting of 1099 forms, how to accurately fill one out if you're the payor, what happens when you get one that's not correct, how do you fix it, and then what other things you need to look at if they contain errors, what should you do? Hopefully working closely with your tax advisor to make sure that things are accurately reported so that you get the tax benefits. One of the things that do not expect the tax software to correctly report the payments on the tax return. The creators of the tax software are not looking at how farmers operate. They're looking at IRS operations and how IRS treats things, which is fine. But there's certain things that farmers can do that we have to do workarounds. And you'll want to understand that. So again, your tax advisor is helpful, and they are important to include in this discussion. So take the copies of the forms, this presentation, as well as the contracts, agreements, etc., that you've signed with these companies to make sure that your tax preparer has the correct and update information. Here's some additional information that's available on the ruletax.org website. There's discussion of the various 1099 information return forms. There's more than just the 4 I presented here. There's a whole pile of them. These are the ones that I feel like were the most common. These are the ones that the tax group that I work with, have found to be most often in error and improperly done. So that's why I included these 4 and showing you how to fix the problems. There's also some IRS publications there listed. If you go to the irs.gov website and you type in the search box, the Farmer's Tax Guide or the 1099 Miscellaneous or NEC, those forms, there's instructions that pop up with the copies of the form so that you can see what's going on. This is very helpful to you and understand what you've received. So with that, hopefully you've got some questions. If we don't have any here and you come back and say, I found one I'd like to talk to you about, send it to info@ruletax.org. Anybody who's on board with us today, we'll make sure that they're forwarded to me, or any other tax preparer or any other person in the group that we work with, so that your answer or questions are answered quickly and accurately. So follow-up questions, use that info@ruletax.org because we like to keep track of the questions and how many they came in. So that would be the most helpful to us.
So JC, I'm not seeing any questions coming in through the QA or chat, but if you don't mind, I've got a couple of quick things that I know that we have a tendency to receive questions on, and I want, even if you have said it already, maybe from an emphasis standpoint. One, let's go back over the 1099-S. What can we expect to receive those for again, or what do I need to know to make sure I'm sending out an S versus the miscellaneous? Because this is a big issue with these two in particular.
Right. This is the one I have the most problems with when I work with oil companies and also energy companies. So box 2 of the 1099-S, that's the sale of real estate or permanent easement, sale of timber. So when you're looking at a real estate sale, let's say you sell a farm. That sale gets reported on a 1099-S. Sale of a permanent easement, that gets reported there on the 1099-S as well. And that keeps it from being, that allows the basis to be adjusted in the proper tax reporting. So the gross proceeds show up in box 2, that gets on the 4797. Then we look at the basis of the land, the property. We adjust the gross proceeds by the basis, depending upon, for permanent easement, if the easement value is less than the basis in the land, we pay no tax. If it's more than that, we simply reduce the basis to 0 and only pay tax, and that's capital gain tax, if that land has been held more than 1 year, so that it gets a special tax treatment. Capital gains taxes are much more friendly to the taxpayer. The bottom rate's 10%, 15% versus the ordinary income, which starts at 10 and can go up to 33. So that's where the 1099-S comes in. That's the proceeds from real estate, permanent easement, etc.
So we also get a lot of questions. We got a lot of our farms and ranchers that utilize tax professionals and attorneys. Do we have to provide a 1099 to those folks if we pay them more than $600 a year? This is relatively common, and if anybody that's dealt with an attorney now, it seems like it's an easy $350 to $500 an hour, and so these can rack up pretty quick. I'll have you answer that, and then we've had 3 questions that just came in almost all simultaneously here that we will hit in a moment.
Okay, you'll notice here on the 1099 miscellaneous, and I didn't talk about this, but what you'll see on the box of the 1099 miscellaneous, box 10, gross proceeds paid to an attorney. And to my knowledge, it's not the 600, it might be $600 that triggers that. Most attorneys that I've ever dealt with, I pay them $10, I put it in there just for my own protection. But yes, that's where you report payments to an attorney. Accountants are a little different. Since you're working with your accountant, what typically happens there is they just go ahead and do the 1099 themselves, and you're done.
And, what happens, is it okay if I provide a 1099 to someone as long as it's the correct 1099, even if it falls below, that $600 rule or whatever it happens to be?
It's there is no harm in doing so. It never hurts. If you even question it, go ahead and send a 1099 in. But the rules on the 1099s is what those proceeds amounts are. So that when you have to file a 1099, if you go back to the end of this presentation and look at the references, all those references and instructions tell you exactly what those dollar amounts are for various individuals, etc., where you have to file the 1099.
All right, so now I think we've, just those few questions have given some individuals time to think. So we've got some questions coming out. So right now we've got a question. What should I type in a box 24Z on Schedule 1 to correct a 1099G box 6 to report on Schedule F, boxes 4A and 4B?
So let's say you get paid $10,000 for, let me go back down here and we'll find it. So you get in box 6, let's say that was $6,000. Make it simple. So you get $6,000 in taxable grants. In the Schedule 1, on line 8Z, you're going to put $6,000. And then when you go to line 24Z, you will also put $6,000. So that completely takes out the $6,000 reported as income, report the $6,000 as an adjustment. That zeroes that portion out, and the remainder then goes to the Schedule F, 4A, and 4B. So it's the same dollar amount that shows up in box 6 that's reported in 8Z and 24Z. Exact same dollars.
Adam, you're muted.
It's time to hear
Sorry
you.
about that. So the next question is there any point in even attempting to ask the USDA to correct an incorrect 1099? And regardless of 1099G, 1099S, or even if it's just they chose the wrong box, are we going to get anywhere with that?
I can't answer that. The reason for that, I can't answer it. Most of the folks that I've been dealing with are trying to get the tax returns out by April 15th. And if you're trying to do that, you don't have enough time to request a corrected form. You might as well do the adjustments. It'll be faster, and there's no problem in doing so.
All right. The last question we presently have, unless more come in, is I've received a small business relief grant from my tribe, but a third party conducted the grant award. I received a 1099 NEC, and the grant was part of the COVID-19 pandemic relief assistance. I had also applied for the same for the sam.gov to receive the grant as well. Should I have received a 1099G? And I don't know if there's supposed to be more to that question or not, but we've got three different things it seems like kind of going on right here.
Okay, with the scenario that they just described, they should not have received a 1099G. That was a non-taxable event.
So, I mean, really what we did, we've got a 1099 NEC that had been received, right? And so what does that mean? And so why don't you explain why a 1099G versus a C?
Well, my knowledge. And then just pay, I said that, I misstated when I said it's a non-taxable grant. It's a trying to think what the term was. That person give you their contact information? If they could send that same question to me, I'd like to look at all the pieces. Maybe jumping off too deep, just trying to answer it with what you read to me. I think I may have to ask some more questions. So if we can get their name and contact information, I'd like to talk to them.
Yep, so please send the email to info@ruraltax.org and we will respond to that because you've got 3-4 different pieces that are here. It's, we need to understand that really it's the individuals that are cutting the check to you that are going to be providing you with the 1099 if a 1099 is required. And so that's the first thing on why we may see an NEC versus a G in some cases.
Yeah, that wasn't a government payment, so that was an individual. I'm wondering, so when you said it was on an NEC, I'm wondering if that should have
It's a
been,
third party that was administering the monies on behalf of the originator of those fundings, which may have been the government. My guess is a lot of those were then sub-awarded. And so in this case, it's dealing with a tribe, which also adds an additional layer of complication because there's a few additional questions that need to be garnered.
correct. That's why need their contact information on that.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I appreciate it. And it looks like they will be sending us an email. Please provide us with as much information in detail as you possibly can with regards to that. And we will have Annie watches out for us for those emails. And she'll make sure that she gets that to JC, myself. And we also have a few individuals, some of us, there's about 4 or 5 of us that deal with working with our tribes and our nations because there's some uniqueness that surrounds some of those tax issues and challenges around that as well. Do we have any other questions coming in through Q&A or chat? I am not seeing any at this time. I will ask one more question, JC, simply because it is also another topic that we typically get, and there is some nuances with regards to that. I have a veterinarian that comes out to my ranch and helps us do a little bit work with my beef cattle or comes out to my dairy, whatever it happens to be. The vet service is a corporation. Must I provide a 1099 to that vet?
The corporation, no.
But they are also,
Yes.
okay. So, but now they're also part of the healthcare system, right? And so we've got some rules in there with regards to 1099s and C Corps that all of a sudden get overruled. So how do we handle this? What do we need to do? What do we need to ask?
So when you're looking at what to ask, make sure that you ask that it's true C Corp, and make sure that when you pay them, make sure that you're paying or they have them separate what you're getting from a medical supply type items versus what you're paying for their expertise and work. So there's 2 parts that you're going to have one broken apart, and there's where you kind of get some of the rub on this. And so look at the other 1099 fact sheet that we put together. Let's see if I can find it right quick. Here at the bottom, information returns, great information there that was updated last year on rules and how they apply for the corps, for others. Kind of breaks it down very well.
I appreciate that. I was trying to buy a little bit of time for some folks just in case there were more questions or follow-ups coming up. And I think with this, I'm not seeing any additional questions popping up. We will conclude here. I'd like to again say thank you to JC Hobbs, Miss Annie White, also for helping coordinate this event, as well as our partners with USDA for supplying us, and we do have a contract with USDA presently for us to be able to provide these types of activities and programming initiatives, as well as providing some of the work that you will find if you go to ruraltax.org. And so again, we appreciate it. Please visit ruraltax.org, www.ruraltax.org. And if you have any questions, you will find our information on how to contact us there. And or you may send us an email at info@ruraltax.org. Everybody, please have a good day. If you have any questions, we look forward to seeing you in the future and hearing from you. I hope this was worthwhile. Thank you.
Thanks.